When talking about the best weapons in Fortnite, a lot of people come to similar conclusions, and typically for good reason. But what about those underrated weapons? Well, today I wanted to go over 3 weapons that in their current state, I personally believe are underrated. Now these are weapons that I personally think are underrated. There's a lot of factors that can determine what someone considers to be underrated, including their personal preference, their skill in different areas of the game, and even the platform that they actually play Fortnite on. So some of you may have different ideas of underrated weapons, but these are just the 3 weapons that I personally think are underrated. This list is also not in any particular order. So to start off with the first underrated weapon, we have the dual wield pistols. Recently the dual wield pistols got 2 buffs. The first buff was epic, lowering their rarity, so instead of them being epic and legendary, or purple and gold, they are now rare and epic, or blue and purple. That means that just finding this weapon is a whole lot easier. The second buff is more of a hidden one. If you guys watched my dual wield pistols breakdown months ago, you'll remember me mentioning a bug with the weapon that would cause a bullet to disappear. Here's a clip from TSM Daquan of this exact bug happening when he first used the dual wield pistols. This is a bug that has been around for a long time as well, because here is a clip from Nick830 months later where the same bug happened. This wasn't a very rare bug either. Almost every single time you fired the first 2 bullets of the dual wield pistols, this bug would occur, causing you to miss out on 50% of your initial potential damage. So with that bug fixed, it of course makes this weapon way better. Along with that, this weapon is a good medium range option already. Right here is the range breakdown on the purple dual wield pistols. Remember that one plank is a piece of wood, brick, or metal laid flat on the ground, and it is approximately 5 meters. 30 damage per shot at max fall off distance is really good, especially when you have 2 shots per burst. That is more than 70% of its damage, and as we know from other weapons in Fortnite, some of them get all the way down to like 40% damage, such as the SMGs, and that's happening at like 8 planks for them. So that's a pretty good medium range that we want this weapon to be for it to be effective at that medium range. Those of you who watch my videos consistently know that I'm always looking for a good medium range weapon, and this weapon definitely fits in that category. But there is one major downside and big problem with this weapon, and that is that it has an extremely slow draw speed. Currently its draw speed is 34 frames, which is approximately 57 hundredths of a second, but its draw speed actually feels even slower than it really is. This is caused by the weapon having an audio cue that makes you think that the gun is ready to fire when it's actually not ready to fire. So aligning that audio cue better with when the weapon is actually ready to be fired will make this gun feel a lot more fluid and a lot faster, even though nothing actually changed. But why is the draw speed on this weapon so slow to begin with? Because even if they do align the audio cues properly with this weapon, it's still going to be a lot slower than every other weapon in Fortnite. Well, the main reason that this gun is so slow is the same reason that the pump shotgun used to be so slow. And that's because Epic didn't want the dual wield pistols to be doubled up. With the recent mechanic changes to shotguns where double swapping between the same weapon or even different shotgun causes a cooldown, I'd like to see that change added to the dual wield pistols and drastically decrease the actual draw speed. Overall, the dual wield pistols need to be looked at to make them a little bit more viable in my opinion, but in their current state, they're still pretty decent, and if you haven't used them in a while, I'd say give it a go. The next underrated weapon that I wanted to touch on is the pump shotgun. A lot of people have discovered that this weapon is decent again, but I think that it still earns the title of underrated because a lot of people still choose the tactical shotgun over it. A lot of people judge the pump shotgun based on its former glory, and compared to that, it will never live up to expectations. But I do think that it is still in a very good spot after its draw speed changes, and I personally even ranked it better than the tactical shotgun. If you want a more in-depth look at why I chose the pump shotgun over the tactical shotgun, I would suggest checking out my video on the best shotgun in Fortnite, which I will link in the description as well as at the end of this video. Now the thing about the pump shotgun, as well as the dual wield pistols for that matter, is that it requires you to be an effective builder. It's all about taking quick shots and getting behind cover or building your own cover before your opponent can react and do damage to you. That is a pretty common theme with the 3 weapons that I'm discussing today in this video. They all require a lot more tactical movement than most weapons. With that being said, let's move on to the final underrated weapon that I want to cover in this video, and that is the Burst Assault Rifle. A couple weeks ago, the Burst got a buff, so let's go over the patch notes really quick. It says Burst Assault Rifle Accuracy Adjustments. When holding down the trigger, the first 2 bursts are more accurate. Spread down sights benefit increased from 35% to 40%. Crouch spread benefit reduced from 25% to 20%. Jumping/falling spread penalty reduced from 25% to 10%. And sprinting spread penalty reduced from 50% to 30%. So there was one nerf in there, that being that the spread when crouching isn't quite as effective as it used to be, but everything else was a positive change for the Burst Assault Rifle. The biggest and most important changes in my opinion were the jumping and sprinting spread penalties being reduced. While you obviously aren't going to want to shoot the burst while sprinting or jumping, what this does is that immediately after jumping or running, your gun is going to be more accurate. As I mentioned earlier, all of these weapons, including the Burst Rifle, are meant to be used quickly and tactically. You want to constantly go back and forth between cover, so the less penalties you have for moving, the more accurate your weapon is going to be when you are actually ready to fire it. A great benefit of the Burst Assault Rifle is that it also has a fast draw speed. At 21 frames, approximately 35 hundredths of a second, the burst can be used effectively as a combination weapon up close. Taking a quick shot with your shotgun, then switching to the burst can be a pretty deadly combo. Now, what about the downsides of this weapon? The biggest problem to me is how poor the lowest rarity of the burst is in terms of accuracy. Every weapon in Fortnite gradually gets more accurate as the rarity gets higher, so a white burst rifle is going to be a lot less accurate than the gold version would be. So there's 2 solutions to this. Number 1, you can give the weapon better accuracy overall for all rarities, or, and this is the one that I would personally like to see, you could remove the white burst and push every other rarity down a notch. So that would mean that the green burst would become the white burst, and the gold burst would become the purple burst. Very rarely do you end up getting a gold or even purple burst in Fortnite currently, because very few people even pick it up. So lowering the rarity will also greatly better balance the burst, because it's currently balanced around the gold being the best weapon, but the demand for the gold burst just isn't there, which means that the supply needs to go up a little. So there are the 3 weapons that I personally think are underrated. While I do think that they're all underrated, I still believe that there are good reasons that they aren't considered to be the best weapons, because currently there are just better options out there than these 3. But I do think that they get less credit than they deserve, because they are still effective weapons when used correctly. These weapons just require you to be a little bit more tactical and often a good builder, so it makes sense that not a lot of people will find them worth using. As I alluded to earlier, it can be a lot more difficult for people on different platforms to use these weapons effectively. Using something like the dual wield pistols on mobile is going to be a lot harder than on something like PC, where on PC you can build and move effectively, whereas with mobile it's a little bit more difficult to build. I think all 3 of these weapons could use some adjustments. Like I said, I'd like to see the dual wield pistols have a faster draw speed. I'd like to see the burst lowered in rarity so it's easier to find. And then for the pump shotgun, I'd like to see its headshot multiplier go back to 2.5 times. It wouldn't be quite as good as it used to be because the base damage on the pump has been nerfed. The blue and the green are now only doing 85 and 80 respectively for body shot damage, so the maximum headshot damage on a green pump would only be 200 if you got exactly in the right spot and were able to hit all 10 pellets, so it wouldn't be quite as powerful as it used to be, but I think it would still be in a pretty good spot. And if they're worried about it being too effective at different ranges, they've already shown that they are capable of doing effective damage drop off for different weapons at different range, so they could really just make it work perfectly into the really up close range. But we will see what Epic decides to do in the future. Anyway, that is all that I have for this video. Thank you all so very much for watching. If you're new here and like this type of content where I try to go in depth on weapons, be sure to subscribe, as that is what I do constantly on this channel. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, thank you so very much. It truly means a lot to me. and I'll catch you all in my next video.